Welcome to Kilobytes, the series where we discuss characters who don't get as much screen time, but we still want a spotlight. I am Sandile.
And I'm Fadzai.
And today we are talking about a lesser known character, obviously on theme, Tripp Cooke. Now, if you're asking yourself, who the hell is that? He's this guy who shows up in season 6 and sticks around for a little bit and then goes away. But we'll get into it. It's right at the beginning of season 6. Picture it if you will. Mystic Falls, but a little bit changed. The other side is gone following the end of season 5, and with it, our icon, Bonnie Bennett, and some other guy. Everyone's... I was hoping to sneak that one in. After everyone's favorite antagonist, the Travelers, got blown up at the end of that season in possibly the biggest hate crime in this fictional universe, they left behind a spell over the town that strips away magic. So there is no witchcraft, and more importantly, no vampires in Mystic Falls as season 6 starts. But that does not stop vampires from apparently skulking around the border of the town, waiting to grab a quick snack when the locals head in and out. At least it doesn't stop Elena, who at the beginning seems to be the only vampire doing that. She's high on witch drugs. She's hallucinating Damon. Who cares? This is not her episode. Assumedly, I think it's as a response to this going on, there is a community protection squad that has been started up in Mystic Falls by this weird little man, Tripp Cooke. The only person we know who is a part of this squad is Matt Donovan, but the squad seems to be, like him, a bunch of other average, slightly muscular white boys around 20. But I did not know this, went back to check. Very pleased to see they had 2 girlies in there. So, you know, a little bit progressive.
Yay.
2012. So, in that first episode of season 6, Elena bites down on this girlie at the border of Mystic Falls. The girl slips away into the anti-magic field of Mystic Falls before Elena can stop her. She starts, like, burning up because, again, the magic strips away vampirism and she would die if she went any further. This girl runs all the way into the town center of Mystic Falls. She's holding her bleeding neck and she collapses on the road where the... When you make Community Protection Squad into an acronym, it is CPS. So I'm going to try not to say that all the time because there's just going to be a lot of confusion. I'll just be calling them the squad. The squad happens to be jogging there. I'm assuming it's a weekend. I hope they have other things going on outside of this squad. Matt is the first one to notice this girl and immediately runs over. And when he gets to her and he's like, what happened? Because she's bleeding, obviously. And she describes some girl outside. She was having car trouble. She asked this girl for help. And then the girl bit her. Matt immediately clocks, okay, this is vampire business. Then Tripp Cooke comes over, again, who runs this community protection squad. He brings the rest of the squad over. And when they're asking her what happened, Matt is like, it was a dog. She was driving. She hit a dog and it bit her. Immediately a cover story. He's Mystic Falls gang strong. Tripp does not look convinced and asks the girl, is that what happened? But then Sheriff Forbes pulls up in her squad car, which is not a car belonging to the squad. It is a police vehicle. Just to make sure we're not confused. Tripp tells Liz Forbes that this girl was attacked, but he doesn't think they're getting the full story. Liz is already having Matt usher this girl away because she sees what's happening. Tripp tries to go after them and Liz grabs him by the arm to stop him and is like, oi, what are you doing? This man starts getting confrontational. He's like, what are you doing? We have to talk to her. You didn't even ask her what happened. And Liz is like, we'll get a full statement from her after she's been treated. I don't know if you noticed, she is bleeding profusely from the neck. And she tells him, listen, if we're keeping it a buck, you run a volunteer program. You are not law enforcement. Keep out of the way, please, and let me do my job. Tripp is like, okay, fine, I back off, but he does not look happy. In the second episode, I forgot to say, Tripp Cooke played by Colin Ferguson, who is a Canadian actor. He's been in, I think his biggest thing early on was a show called Eureka, which is a sci-fi show, SYFY, the channel. He was law enforcement there. He was like a sheriff of a small town, but the government had hid away a bunch of scientists in there, and that's where they did all their like inventing and testing of strange technologies. So he was like getting into hijinks as the main character of the show. And then he had like a 10-episode run on this show called Haven, one of my favorite shows, that was also on the Sci-Fi channel. He's in like season 5 or 6 or something. Very interesting character. I won't get into it because of spoilers, but People should watch Haven. It's a good show. The effects leave a lot to be desired because, again, it's a sci-fi show. That channel notoriously
Hey,
does
I'm
not
a
have.
Buffy fan, so whomst am I?
With Buffy, you understand it's from 1998. Haven is from 2010. So, But if you can get over that, it's a very interesting show.
I mean, even the Arrowverse could at times.
No comment. Arrowverse early on had a decent budget.
Yeah, when it was the Arrow show, who doesn't have people with superpowers in the beginning. But by the time we get to Barry...
I mean, even The Flash.
I mean, there's a stage in The Flash where Barry is like running up buildings and becoming a PS3 character.
Look, I
let it slide because I'm like, I understand that money is an issue when it comes to TV shows.
Right. Those later seasons get rough. But anyways, Haven's great. It's supernatural nonsense. It's a procedural. There's the main trio is very like, if you're into the Elena, Stephen Damon dynamic, there's that going on in Haven. So, fun times. But they're adults, so it's all okay and normal. Anyway, second episode. While Matt is jogging at night, Tripp pulls up in his Jeep, maybe? I don't know what car he drives, but it seems the size and shape of a Jeep. And he asks him about the girl from the previous night with the animal bite. Some people will start to call her dog bite girl, which is just So Matt tells him that she stayed over at his house. This is because she hooked up with Jeremy, which is something we don't need to get into. But now she's gone. Tripp tells Matt that he's got deputy buddies at the station. So it's like, oh, Tripp's connected. And he's learned that they ran the girl's number plates and learned that her car was stolen. So he's concerned now because if there's a bad element coming through town, he wants to know about it. And I was like, oh, this girlie, Sarah, by the way, we learned her name is person of color, a little bit like not perfectly cookie cutter. Oh, you think she's a bad element, Tripp Cooke? Interesting. I see how you roll. The next morning, Matt calls Tripp and lets him know that Sarah told him that she has family here. And Tripp is like, I think that's another lie. Matt starts talking to him about Jeremy and his whole ordeal, which felt like a non sequitur to me. But then when I double checked, it was like, oh, because Jeremy and Sarah went off to break into the Salvatore's home and just hang out there. So I guess just to make sure he knows Jeremy's not like a problem element, he's just having a troubled time. Tripp then tells him, oh, I know all about Jeremy. I grew up with his dad. And Matt's like, oh, so you're from Mystic Falls? And he's like, yeah, born and raised. I'm actually from one of the founding families. My full name is Thomas Vincent Fell III. My dad called me Tripp as a child because I was very clumsy. A devastating thing to do to a child, but alas. And it tracks because apparently his father split on their family. And then Tripp took his mother's maiden name. He then says, can you imagine? Tripp fell, which is the funniest joke he's ever heard in his life.
I mean, being the third, apparently, in American culture, possibly also English culture, results in someone being called Tripp as a nickname.
Oh, that's just a thing?
Yeah, that's a thing. I learned this because of Tripp.
Oh, triple.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Triple. I learned this because of Tripp Vanderbilt, a character in Gossip Girl who is Nate's maternal cousin from the real life Vanderbilt family.
That's crazy. Anderson Cooper, I'm watching you, buddy. Your Diamond Air family.
Oh, yeah.
Was it Diamonds? I don't know.
I recently learned that he's descended from the Vanderbilts. I was like,
yeah. Yes, mom's a Vanderbilt. When Matt asks him, okay, that means you know about the stuff that goes with being founding family. And this man says, what, is there a secret handshake I never got taught? It's like, oh, okay, well, it seems like he doesn't know anything. Then he's like, look, I've got to go. I'll talk to you soon. Gets off the call. He's not driving his Jeep this time. The vehicle he's driving seems much bigger. He turns his head and slides this metal port behind him. It's this weird, armored van. Opens from, the driver's section to, the back of the van. And he says, any final words? And the camera pulls out. And there are several people handcuffed in the back of the van, struggling against their restraints. One of them has their mouth open and you can see fangs. So assumedly, these are all vampires. And vervained vampires, given that they are struggling to break free from just a set of handcuff and chains. And one of them was all woozy, I think. We see the van drive past the town sign, and then the vampires start to cough up blood. So, they are being affected by the anti-magic spell, which means he's rounded up a bunch of vampires from outside Mystic Falls and is driving them inwards. So, I guess it's not just Elena, and that was my bad. Sorry to Elena. There are other vampires skulking around the border. He then hits a button on the dash, which opens the sunroof of this armored van, flooding sunlight into it, and all the vampires catch alight and burn, as vampires do. He then slides the port closed, and he smiles to himself, full teeth smile, and then turns up the volume on the radio. This whole time, non-diegetically, REM's Everybody Hurts has been playing, and when he turns up the dial, the music increases. So it's once again another diegesis crossing moment for the Vampire Diaries.
They love doing that. They've been doing that since
season 1.
Was it episode 2? Whatever episode it is that Elena figures out. Not episode 2, that's too early. But like episode 3 or 4.
Episode 5 is when she figures out Stefan's a vampire.
Yes. When Beauty of the Dark is playing and it's like, Caroline has a scene with her mom. Elena goes to find Stefan. Bonnie is going to her grams because she's a witch. And then suddenly it's like, no, Vicky and her stoner friends are listening to the radio in their car in the woods. And the song ends and her friend is like, hey, Vicky, go turn the radio on again.
We mentioned that in the Siren episode because in the Siren episode it happens again when the Siren starts singing the song that's playing in the background of the show.
It's like, yes!
What's going on? They love doing that shit. And you know what? I love it.
It was such a sinister little intro for Tripp because founding family member, immediately I assume, oh, you've got a thing against vampires. I was pleasantly surprised to find Meredith Fell didn't really have anything against them. She's like, look, I just want to practice medicine and save lives with this magical cheat code. But any other time someone is like, oh, I'm a founding family member, I know about vampires, and they aren't a vampire themselves, I'm like, oh, you're gonna be an issue. And never the main issue, always some side issue.
They're always a side issue. And interestingly, of the founding families, the Fells are A, the least important, and B, the only ones where it's like, there's no prominent Fell that's like a problem. There was that old man Fell who gets killed by the tomb vampires in Ghostworld.
Oh, yes. Tobias.
And then it's Meredith, who's not part of the founding family. She is on the council technically, but like you said, just doing her medical thing.
I mean, there's also Logan.
There is Logan, true. So I guess it's the first one since Logan.
Yeah.
Interesting. Definitely the spottiest family, though.
Yes.
But yeah, so we've got a founding family member after a while of not having to worry about founding families, and he seems to know about vampires, and he knows how to deal with them. Episode 3. Matt comes through, around the back of some building that I still don't know what it was, but that seems to be where the squad hangs out and where they do their training. No, they do their training just, on the road in the middle of town. Maybe it's just where they leave their equipment. But they don't have any equipment. They just have, clothes that seem to be branded for the squad, but I don't know for sure. It's very weird what's happening with them. He finds Tripp there with some of the squad boys. They're cleaning out the back of his van, and it is washing out red. Matt's like, what's going on? And Tripp says, oh, I was carting some mulch so that you guys could go sort out a park in town, and I didn't know that red mulch stains. So already just cloak and dagger. Matt's here to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to a party with my friends later, just to let you know. And Tripp's like, what, do I need to sign a permission slip? I'm not your parent. Go do what you gotta do. Just take your buddy Jay. He needs to get out or whatever. I don't know. He just pawns off Jay on him. Jay will not matter. Don't worry about him. He's just annoying for one episode. And he tells them both that they should keep their eyes open because there have been a lot of animal attacks recently. And so they're like, okay. In the middle of the episode, during a stupid altercation between Enzo and Stefan, Enzo throws a stake past Stefan and hits Squad Boy Jay, who was apparently waiting in the trees with a stake shotgun to kill Stefan. So that's what? What's going on there? Then the same evening after the party that they're having's over, this is the party Matt and Jay went to, Enzo brings Jay's dead body to Tyler's truck because I guess he just expects him to lend it to him. Matt is there and stunned to learn A, his friend Jay is dead, B, Jay was a hunter. At the end of the episode, Enzo goes to a diner in town Tripp is already there, sitting at the bar. And when Enzo starts snapping his fingers demanding service, because there's nobody else in this bar, Tripp is like, oh, I've sent everybody home for the night. Who gave Tripp that authority? I don't know. And then he says, I can't have you killing more of the waitstaff. As he's saying that, he's sneaking out a syringe of vervain from his pocket and he jabs Enzo in the neck. And he says, you need to consider being more discreet when you're feeding because you never know who's watching you. And then Enzo's like, oh, I can fight the vervain. I was in Augustine. But then Stefan comes through the front door and shoots him in the back with the steak shotgun. So he's done. Stefan introduces himself to Tripp, full name, and Tripp is like, oh, founding family, say no more. Then Stefan goes to make a lethal shot on Enzo, and Tripp says, actually, if you don't mind, I have my own way I like them to die. Yikes.
He gives very serial killer vibes the whole time.
Yeah, we start painting a very odd picture of who this man is.
Even the fact that in his first scene doing that, when he's driving the vampires over the line, they're weak and tied up and will presumably be dead in a couple of minutes. I mean, the exact amount of time it takes varies depending on what the writers feel
Unclear.
But they will definitely be dead in like under 20 minutes, let's say. But he chooses to open the sunroof and burn them, I guess, by virtue of their daylight rings not working, if they have those daylight rings, or just burning naturally as a vampire does. And I'm like, oh no, he's really enjoying making them suffering in as many ways as he can, when a steak would really work.
It's like, okay, this isn't necessarily about utility. There's something more going on here where you are enjoying this. When he opens the sunroof, he shuts that metal port as he smiles, full teeth smile. Just like, another day's work. It's like, oh no, what's going on? Following episode, Matt comes to Tripp's office. It is not clear what Tripp's job is. Maybe someone else says it outside of a scene that he's in, but there is an American flag in like the corner of the office, so maybe it's something civil. I don't know. He's on the phone with Squad Boy Jay's parents, informing them of his death, when Matt asks if Tripp knows what happened to Jay. Matt is cloak and daggering. He obviously knows everything. Tripp is like, you tell me. You were with him at the party. And then Matt's like, oh, he was drunk. I offered him a ride. He said he'd walk. I should have given him a ride. Otherwise, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Tripp is like, okay, well, I'm going to the sheriff's office to give a statement. And Matt's like, I'll go with you. I might be the last person who saw him alive. On the way back from the police, they're in the car. They're in, I think, his armored van again. I don't know why this man has two cars. I mean, obviously to kill vampires, but then it's like, why drive your vampire killing car to the police? Where's your Jeep? I don't know. Maybe I invented the Jeep, actually. Every time he's driving, you're only seeing like the inside of the car or like through the windshield. They don't pull out to see the whole car. So maybe he just has a van. Matt asks Tripp why he and Sheriff Forbes don't get along. And Tripp tells him that Liz and his wife were high school rivals over the captaincy of their field hockey team. And I was like, that's the gayest thing I've ever heard. Matt is surprised to learn that Tripp is married, and Tripp explains that his wife, Chris, which is Kris, I checked the wiki, died in a car accident, which is why he left Mystic Falls. There were just too many memories here. They then talk about what they said to the sheriff, and Matt, who is fishing for information, says, hey, this crazy thing that Jay told me that day, he said he was tracking a vampire. That's crazy, right? And then Tripp, fully stone-faced, turns to Matt's like, I'm going to show you something. And then we cut away. That's it. He's so dramatic and so insane. The thing is, otherwise, he's a very normal, like, jovial, like, I'm like your father figure, but not really. I run a hard ship, but I keep my boys running good. Because there's a lot of, like, but, like, the girlies disappear as soon as, like, the actual drama happens. You truly never see them, which is a shame.
Maybe it's for the best, considering how the vampires in this show tend to treat women.
Yeah, they probably got off safe. But it'd be nice to see some of them be like, yeah, we're squad girls and we steak, Maybe that would be fun. Anyway, that night, it's like midday when he tells him this. So I don't know if they just kind of like hang out for a couple hours and wait for sundown.
It's always
says, meet up
so
with me later.
Funny when they do that on TV. When someone is like, I've got something to show you. And either they go to a location which is on the other side of town, or they eventually get to whatever the thing is, like several hours later, and the daylight is gone. And I'm like, so this person just sat with you in silence for
just like
2 hours.
Okay, I'll just wait for you to show me this thing. So, what you have for lunch? Tripp takes Matt that night to a secret shed that he's got in the middle of nowhere. And he tells Matt, I only show this to people I trust. Apparently, when there was a gas leak in town, this was during the Traveler drama at the end of season 5, he came back to Mystic Falls after many years to check on his grandmother. And when he crossed the town border, he started getting a bunch of his memories back. And he realized his wife did not die in a car accident. He doesn't say what, but he says someone killed her in front of him and made him think that it was his fault. So, seemingly all this time, he didn't know vampires existed. This is all new to him in the last 3 or 4 months, give or take, is how long he's known about vampires. He then takes Matt inside the shed and shows him that he's got Enzo chained up and he is on a whole ass crusade. So, Fell family apparently standard to just not tell any of the family members that vampires are a thing. But here's what we've got going on.
That's so strange, because when Alaric asks Meredith, he's like, are you in the Founders Council? Meredith's like, no, I know about vampires, but I kind of mind my own business. I assumed that meant everyone who is a founding family member gets told about the supernatural and then, well, at least about vampires, and then decides for themselves what they want to do. I'm not sure if Mason didn't know about vampires when he was off in Florida before Catherine triggered his werewolf curse. It's possible he knew about vampires, just not about lycanthropy. It's strange that even if Tripp was being raised by his mother, who isn't a Fell, in a town that is teeming with his cousins, no older relative was like, come, my young nephew, let me tell you about our legacy.
Our family. It is a bit strange, yeah. As the grandmother, I guess it's a maternal grandmother. She wasn't a little hunter back in the day. But yeah, this is all new for Tripp. But the fact that in that 3 months he has now set up and he's got an operation going, kind of impressive. He's industrious, clearly. Now he's like, I want to get all the vampires. There's clearly a problem here in this town and I'm going to be the one to end it. Next episode, Tripp calls up Stefan and thanks him for turning over Enzo. And he's like, yeah, I'm trying to get names of any others of his vampire friends, but he's given me nothing so far. Nothing except a lead in Savannah. Savannah is where Stefan is currently staying, so that's a whole other thing, because Enzo's always trying to ruin Stefan's shit. And that prompts Stefan to be like, okay, I've got to get out of here. So him and his girlfriend Ivy, don't worry about it, they head off. At the end of that episode, Ivy, who has been through just a bunch of drama these 2 episodes, she's wandering down the street near Whitmore campus, and she waves down a large vehicle thinking it's Caroline, who she was just on the phone with, who's coming to get her. It is in fact Tripp in his weird little armored van, and when she sees him, she turns around and keeps walking. I don't know if it's because it's oh, I thought it was Caroline, but it's not, let me move, or if she recognizes Tripp. I went back and checked, and Ivy knows Tripp is a person to be concerned about in the current drama, because she's there when Stefan and Caroline are talking about him. But I'm like, did somebody show her a picture of him? How does she know how that man looks? I don't know. She starts walking off. Tripp is following her, and he's like, oh, I heard there was an accident nearby in some random corn maze. I don't know what a corn maze is, but clearly a bunch of people are hurt. You look like you're bleeding. Maybe you're in shock. Let me help you. And after telling him that she's fine and to leave her alone, Ivy then turns around and lunges to attack him because Ivy is a newly turned vampire, and Tripp shoots her with 3 vervain darts in the chest and throws her into his van.
He was so ready to do that I'm like,
prepped.
Do you just walk around fully strapped, and even when you find someone injured and in distress, you're just
ready for them to be a vampire?
I'm like, as a man, that's so creepy.
So I had the exact same thought, but it does get explained at the beginning of the next episode. So we'll get into it. But just as a note, Caroline, who was coming to get Ivy, is in her car watching this happen from the distance, which is horrified. The next episode, it opens the same night with Tripp driving his armored van. Ivy is now in the back of the van, chained up amongst 1 or 2 vampires, and she is pleading for her life. And Tripp says he knows this may seem a little barbaric, but he promises it's nothing personal. She's like, why are you doing this? And he's like, that's a whole other story. We don't have time to get into that. You're like seconds from death. But you don't want this life, girly, if you can even call it a life. He then turns on the radio because he's got his little system. Like you said, it's very serial killer-esque. He turns on the radio. This is now Why Don't You Love Me by Hank Williams, this yee country-ass song from like the 60s. I assume the 60s. I don't know anything about Hank Williams. Then Ivy, along with the other vampires in the van, of course, cross the border and die of their respective death wounds. Tripp later comes back to the shed where he's got Enzo. Matt's there bringing Enzo his like little ration of blood. And Tripp tells Enzo, Savannah was a waste of my time, but I found the girl whose description matches the girl you told me about from Savannah. She was 500 miles away, all the way back here at Whitmore College. So clearly you're lying to protect some vampire friends like I thought. So that is why he was ready to shoot Ivy. He already had a picture of Ivy that I don't know if Enzo gave it to him or if he just looked her up. But Enzo's like been in Stefan's home in Savannah already, so he might have snooped, he might have found something to take a picture of, who knows.
Wouldn't put it past Enzo, frankly. He was in his obsessed with Stefan era. It then spilled over onto Sarah and Monique. I remembered her name for once.
Yes, Sarah / Monique. That's by the way, the girly, well, it's Monique / Sarah, not really Sarah as the girl who ran to town. Sarah's still on the way. She's a couple episodes away. Tripp tells Enzo, you have today to fess up and give up your vampire friends' names, or I'm driving you over the border. Caroline, again, having seen what happened to Ivy, Matt, who is observing what's happening now with Enzo, and then Stefan. The three of them coordinate to try and spring Enzo so that he doesn't rat out any of the vampires in the Mystic Falls gang. When they get there, Enzo's gone from the shed, and they know Tripp already has Ivy's phone, which has Caroline in the call log from when she called to be like, where are you? I'm coming to get you. So now Caroline has a target on her back. We then see Tripp and some of his squad boys, assumedly a select few who he's told about the vampire thing and folded into his like crusade, are at Caroline's dorm room at Whitmore, where Damon is waiting for Elena reasons that don't super matter right now. They shoot up Damon and snatch him. The trio of Matt, Stefan, and Caroline then rope in Elena and Alaric to help save Damon, and I guess Enzo by association. They then go to block off the like town exits for Mystic Falls, but like from the outside because he's driving them into Mystic Falls. Rick is the one to stop Tripp. We spoke about this in the Alaric episode.
Yes.
He fakes that he needs help with his car. Tripp is like, I don't know anything about cars.
Oh, is it a Jeep in this scene?
I don't know.
Okay.
It might be. No, I lie. Damon and Rick are chained up in the back of the armored van. Yeah, it is the armored van. So I guess there was no Jeep. I'm sad now. I really thought he had a Jeep. He seems like a Jeep kind of guy.
He does.
Anyway.
But I guess the van for the sake of carting around vampires.
You know, it's functional, it's utility.
So creepy. Driving around in this van with chains in the back.
This
and you're
armored, nondescript van. Very creepy. But yeah, Rick is like, help us, and Tripp is like, I don't know anything about cars. I'm not that kind of guy, which is like interesting when you started a town militia, but all right. I guess we all have our strengths. Then Rick is like, okay, then can we at least get a ride? And Tripp is like, sorry, I'm in a rush. This doesn't really seem like my problem. And Rick is like, all right, I'm making it your problem. Smashes the window open. He is, of course, an enhanced original at this point. He grabs him. Tripp punches him, which staggers Rick, which I guess is not unusual. Certainly vampires can be punched by people and be staggered. It happens a bunch of times, I think. Like Rick has punched Damon before and it's like knocked him back, right?
They're less, what's the word?
Not invulnerable.
The damage they take is usually like that of a regular human, and then they just repair themselves.
Exactly. They're still perfectly susceptible to like regular damage. So he punches Rick. Rick gets knocked back a little bit. Other hand, he grabs a Vervain dart gun and shoots Rick in the arm. That staggers him more. And then he tries to drive away, but Rick is latched on for dear life on the side of that car. So he's taking Rick with him. They drive off. He's like trying to grab at the wheel. They veer off course and smash into the car that he and Stefan had come in. Stefan like vamp speeds out of the way because he's like, I'm not getting hit. And then they hit the car, flip, and roll over into the Mystic Falls anti-magic spell area. Big crash, explosion. And we don't see Tripp for the rest of that episode, but in the next episode, we learn he definitely survived the crash. And
I guess he just ran away?
No, he didn't. Not to say he survived and got away. They have him. That's how we know he survived. They've got him. Matt apparently drove him to the shed because he wakes up chained up in the shed. And they tell him, yeah, our pal Matt brought you here. It's Matt, Stefan, and Enzo in here. And Tripp, learning that Matt's the one who brought him, voices his betrayal. And Matt's like, dude, you went after my friends. Like, I don't know what you think is happening here. And Tripp's like, your friends who killed people. So that's like a little fun back and forth. This is the season, of course, where Matt is having like an ideological break of like, I'm friends with vampires, but I hate vampires. That you hope will go somewhere, but yeah. They're all arguing about what to do with Tripp. The first plan is to wipe his memory and send him off, which is Matt's. The other one is kill him and be done with it, which is Stefan's. And the third plan is torture him for information because he's presumably still got like squad boys out and about that they don't know who they are. That is, of course, Enzo's plan. Surprising everyone, Enzo's plan wins out and he whacks Tripp on the hand with a hammer. Tripp, who immediately starts squealing and spills that his boys are out there tracking vampires in his absence. And that includes Caroline Forbes, your little friend. Stefan is immediately like, okay, Enzo, you've got 2 hours. Get all the names of his men. After that, he's a liability. I was like, oh, you said the wrong thing, Tripp, buddy. I'm so sorry. We cut away from that. And when we cut back to the shed, it's just Tripp and Matt. Matt is like sitting reverse style on a chair in front of Tripp, who's chained up. And Tripp is trying to convince Matt that I was trying to make the world a better place. Like, I was trying to get rid of this threat. You're on the wrong side. And Matt's like, I'm not on the wrong side. My side is just really freaking complicated. Enzo then comes back with news that the squad boys have apparently kidnapped the sheriff. This then makes Matt round on Tripp and go, what the hell, dude? And Tripp is like, it's just a contingency plan in case something happens to me. Stop being dramatic. Like, tell them to meet at the edge of town. That's where they know they'll be safe behind the border and we can sort this all out. So, Caroline and Stefan bring Tripp, while Matt comes from the inside with the squad boys because Tripp is like, Matt needs to go and tell them they'll trust Matt, not any of you. Matt's coming with this nameless squad boy, but I recognize him from TikTok. He went viral in like 2020 for a bit. I forget what for though. It was something that was actually... It might have been Jasper. He might have been doing a Jasper from Twilight impression, the whole battle scars thing. And then I think off of that, he then got to like meet with Jackson Rathbone and they recreated the trend, which was really fun. It was just a trend that was going of like that scene in Eclipse where him and Bella are talking about he was in the Confederate Army.
Yeah, I know the scene.
And he's like, battle scars.
It's always made fun of because it's like, why does Jasper suddenly have a southern accent?
One.
When for the last 2 films he didn't have one.
It had nondescript, just like creep vibe. And now he's speaking like he's from Louisiana, bon ton. It's like, okay, cool. But anyway, that guy's there. He's holding a gun to Liz Forbes' head. Liz is already bleeding from the temple. Caroline is pissed. She's like, what did you do to her? And Liz is like, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. I've seen worse. I'm about to die of cancer. That's going to be a much bigger issue. So they meet at the border. They're like, send Liz across. And they're like, no, send Tripp across. So they're like, okay, fine. We give off Tripp. Tripp walks across the border. Squad boy, to be fair, lets go of Liz, who walks across the border outside of town. So fair trade. As Tripp is walking towards Matt, he stops walking and his face changes to like discomfort. And Matt is like, what's wrong? And Tripp says, what's happening to me? And then his head jerks upward and a gash appears all the way across his neck like magic.
I was gagged.
Blood starts oozing out down his neck and he falls to the ground, very clearly dying in the way that vampires do when they cross the Mystic Falls border. Matt is gooped, gagged, sign seal delivered, turns to Stefan and is like, what the hell did you do? Which, crazy. I don't know why you're attacking Stefan like that. Some shit he'd pull. Stefan's like, wasn't me. Enzo must have turned him before we got there. Matt then holds Tripp as he's dying, the light leaving his eyes as the anti-magic spell turns him from a newbie vampire back to a dead body. And so ends the short life of Tripp Cooke, Thomas Vincent Fell III.
Alas, Tripp, we hardly knew ye. But I will say, the Fells just have a habit of being the founding family that we know the least about. So, yeah, it tracks that this Major Fell character is like, well, we barely get to know you.
And you're not gonna stick around that long.
Yeah, Meredith being the only one of Alaric's love interests who doesn't stick around long enough to die. It's very fleeting when compared to other characters in the show.
But like, I think I was so fixated on him because initially I was like, what a weird side quest at the beginning of the season that's so locked away from everything else going on. Because everybody's outside of town, right? Elena, Caroline are in Whitmore. Bonnie and Damon are in a prison world. Stefan's in Savannah, Georgia. Rick's also at Whitmore. Matt's the only one in town. So I guess because it's a Matt storyline, it's like the C plot. So it's like, it's so separate from everything and it's over so quickly that I was always like, God, what a weird side quest. But looking back, it's like, what a fascinating of the anti-vampire characters in the show, of the like founding family hunter types. He's the most industrious and effective, maybe on par with like Pastor Young, who was also like someone who really got shit done for the one episode that he was there. And he doesn't have the benefit of lifelong knowledge. He just found out about vampires and he so quickly set up an operation. Now, is this operation preying on young, impressionable white boys? Absolutely. And that's a commentary on just like power structures in the US anyways. So have a think on that for yourself.
Actually, that is true. That is true.
Think about the army. Think about the law enforcement. The law enforcement he so desperately wants to be. But also at the same time, the fact of like learning his backstory and it's like, damn, you were really traumatized by a vampire. And it's like, you didn't even have that for most of your life. You just got it back all at once because of this anti-magic spell. All your compelled memories were returned. And now you are freshly feeling the trauma of like having your wife been killed in front of you by a vampire. And having believed the whole time that you did it. And he says that and it's like, did they make you think you killed her and then you lied about this whole car accident thing? Or did the vampire make you think you were driving the car and then crashed and then she died and you survived? Unclear.
I assumed it was the latter and that he had survivor's guilt, unless it was a truly sadistic vampire, which, not uncommon in this show.
Exactly. And when you look at it, ultimately, the vampires were being a threat to the people in Mystic Falls. He is very sadistic in the way he deals with the vampires, which is where the like discomfort and the like, ooh, what is this guy about comes in. But looking at it from a very bare bones, like utilitarian perspective, like he is doing a service to Mystic Falls the best way he knows how, which is fascinating, A fascinating antagonist who's very brief and in the large scale not that important. So I was like, maybe it'll be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, I just like saying his name.
Fair enough. He's got a very fun name. I like his Thomas Vincent Fell. That's a good like blue blood founding family name. Thomas Vincent Fell III. Virginia rich money.
Yeah.
All that shit.
Yeah.
I wonder where the second is. Is he still alive? Who knows?
I think wasn't the very first Fell a Thomas?
Possibly. The one who dies on stage?
No, that's Tobias. The one who...
Oh, founding.
Founding, yeah. Thomas and Honoria Fell. Yes, they were part of the people who signed the town charter in 1864. The ones who I'm always like, what were you doing before then? Because Stefan and Damon grew up in this town.
They were settling. You gotta settle first before you found.
How long does it take to settle in a town that was already built when you got there? By black people, I might add. Black people and Matt's paternal ancestors.
Real. But like, I guess I'm always misunderstanding how these naming conventions work. You don't have to be like the son of the second to be the third. You just have to be the third Thomas in that family line.
Yeah, in that line.
Right. So his dad might not be Thomas as well.
Usually people, when you're going that high, it'll be like you are like the child of, but not always. It's a lot like when you look at royal families and it's like Queen Elizabeth II, not the daughter of Queen Elizabeth I,
right?
But she is the second Queen Elizabeth of this royal line.
Interesting. I always just think of Michael Douglas Sr., Michael Douglas Jr., and Michael Douglas Jr., which I called him before I learned you can say third. Also, I can't remember if his name is actually Michael Douglas III or if I just made that up because I found out there were 3 generations. I'll have to go back and check.
I am unfamiliar with this. I always think of Warren from the X-Men, Angel.
Warren Worthington.
Yeah, because I didn't know until I was like maybe like in late primary school that when you're talking about like family, like ordinary families and not like monarchies, you don't say the first or the second. You just go senior, junior, and then you start on the third, the fourth. So I was like surprised when my father was like, "There's no such thing as like, oh, this is John Smith the second." You would say John Smith Jr. And I was like, really? Even when he's a grown man, you still call him John Smith Jr.?
You're still a junior.
And then I Googled, I was like, no, let me check the X-Men comics, who I trust more than my own father.
Wild.
And then it was like, yeah, Warren Worthington's father is called Warren Worthington Jr. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
This old anti-mutant
50s man. Blue blood, New York money. Actually, I don't know if their family's originally from New York, but like surely at the time.
I think Warren's does.
Owns a huge ass company. And he's a junior.
It's
crazy. But yeah, that's Tripp Fell. Tripp Cooke. Thomas Vincent. Whichever you prefer. Actually, no, don't dead name him. He's Tripp Cooke.
As the kids say, who let him cook? Cook those vampires.
They let him cook too
real
long.
Good.
he was roasting them. Hui. Yeah, the psychology of a man scorned, a man traumatized, a man widowed.
It'd be easy to demonize a lot of the founding family members who seem a little extreme with the whole... Because obviously the show shows us so many vampires who are, good people, like Caroline, like Lexi, like Elena pre-dating Damon. But it would be easy to look at these founding families and these hunters as being people who just don't get it. And they're like, they're like the anti-mutant people in Marvel Comics. Because yes, there's a lot of evil mutants and a lot of dangerous mutants. But like to hate them all and paint them with all the same bright, like it's not right.
It's really awful. It's
but
like
because the show...
Vampires.
The show goes out of its way to show you that no, vampires are a problem. And these people, they do have a point.
Yeah, people are dying. Sometimes they'll like go back on that a bit and try to paint it. We've spoken about this. They try to paint vampires as a minority allegory, but honestly disregard all that shit because please stop.
Honestly.
Because like truly, as you say.
Yeah, because if they go there, it's like, well, now we're giving there's bad people on both sides narrative because they both do awful things.
A lot of the time, like founding family shit, they are corrupt for sure. But the practice of like, we need to protect the town from vampires is real because vampires are very often a threat, especially in this town.
It is nice that Tripp sort of starts Matt on that journey of being like, you know what, I've made excuses for y'all because I love Elena and I love Caroline. Good friends, dated them
and
both.
I think Stefan's all right. Yeah.
Stefan's okay until he kills until I think he kills that girlfriend that nobody cares about. But yeah, post this arc, Matt starts to be like, you know what, actually, if I'm going to protect this town, I need to stop making allowances for these people who at the end of the day are very often monsters and very often do not consider human life to be as valuable as their own.
They may claim to do so, but when the chips are down, they are looking out for themselves first and everyone else is collateral. And I cannot be party to that, and I've got to be the one opposing that. Which is an interesting road to take as the last like human in this town.
But then he becomes a cop.
Yeah. To be fair, obviously, Sheriff Forbes was a big force in that respect to be like, I'm using this job to combat the vampire problem. So it makes sense. But also, when Matt becomes a cop, it's a whole vibe I just don't enjoy.
I have to place it on that island that I so often visit.
Yeah.
Like that chain of islands, rather. I have an island where I'm like, the law enforcement in Mystic Falls as disconnected from police culture in the United States in general. Because, I mean, really, they don't really interact with the rest of the police. If anything.
With, like, regular people.
Yeah, like Liz Forbes is breaking several laws every day with the things she does. I don't think you're allowed to put wooden bullets in your gun.
No.
As a cop.
No, that's not police issue standard weapon. What are you holstering, ma'am? What's going on? That's all I've got for Tripp Cooke. And if that's all you've got,
that is all I have.
Then thank you all for tuning in. If you have any questions, queries, or thoughts, please mail them to us at animalattackpod@gmail.com. You can also tweet us at animattackpod. That's at ANIM Attack Pod. There is a link tree in the bio where you will find all our online stuff. From us, sayonara.
Bye.